Ciao friends! In this video, I want to show you how to create a KPI using a Power BI Desktop and Tabular Editor together. Let's start by analyzing the business scenario. At Contoso, they want to do an analysis of the margin percentage by category and by year, and compare the percentage of each category and year with the overall margin percentage. If it happens that for a combination of category and year, the percentage is below the overall, that is bad. If it is above, that is good. If it is around the same value as the overall percentage, that is average. And I want to show all this information using a graphical representation, a KPI. Let's start by looking at the final result I want to obtain. They want to build a report like this. We have the overall margin percentage as a reference, and then the report is showing by category and by year the margin percentage plus the status. The status is red for audio in 2007 because 48.90 is way below 53, whereas cameras and camcorders is green because it's around 60%, so it's very good. Not only they want to show the status, they also want to compute the trend, comparing the percentage of the current year against the previous one. And that is represented as an arrow that goes up or down whether the margin percentage is increasing or decreasing. Now, you could build everything using conditional formatting, but if you did that, you would end up repeating the conditional formatting process for all of your reports. Instead, what I want to do is use Tabular Editor to create a KPI in my report, so that we will be able to use them both in Power BI Desktop and in Excel. But before we move further, we need to understand just a bit of a theory. What is a KPI from the point of view of Tabular? A KPI is basically a measure on steroids. You can turn any measure into a KPI, and once a measure becomes a KPI, it gains additional properties. You will be able to define the value of the KPI, which is the same value as the measure. But then you can define the target, the goal, in our case the overall margin percentage, and the two graphical indicators, the status and the trend. All these are DAX expressions that can be defined in any measure which is turned into a KPI. We are now going to do that step by step. So instead of using this report that already contains everything, we start from a different one that contains only the margin percentage. If we want to create KPI, we need to first, from external tools, launch Tabular Editor. Tabular Editor provides us a user interface to create a KPI. As I said, any measure can be turned into a KPI. What we want to do is turn the margin percentage into a KPI. To do that, you go to Create New KPI. And now I have this additional KPI feature, and from here I can choose the status, the target, and the trend expression. Let's start from the target. Target is the number we want to use as a comparison. I'm not going to type in all the DAX code, I just copy from the working solution, and the target expression is the margin percentage overall, this 53%. I confirm it, and then before I save it, look what happens here at the margin percentage. Right now it is just a measure, but as soon as I click on File, Save, it is no longer a measure, it became a KPI. And if you expand it, you see that we have a value, a goal, and a status. The value is already in my report. If I put the goal, the measure that I define right now, you see it shows 53% everywhere. Now, I'm not interested in looking at the goal. I want to use the goal in order to compute the status. The status is another DAX expression, so we go back here and we define the status expression. Let me copy it where it's already working, so copy and paste. How do we compute the status? The status will be represented as a graphical representation, and it has three values: -1 for bad, 0 for average, 1 for good. So we first compute the percentage, then we use a tolerance of 2%, so not to be too strict on the comparisons, and we compute the goal in three variables. Then we use them. Depending whether the percentage is below the goal minus the tolerance, then we return -1. If the percentage is above the goal plus the tolerance, we return 1, otherwise we return 0. 3 different numbers. And this defines the value of the status. We still need to define what to use as a graphical representation. That is defined here in the status graphic. We want to use a traffic light. Once everything is set, we now File, Save, go back to Power BI Desktop, and now if I add the status to my report, you see I have margin percentage status, which is being shown as a traffic light. Time to define also the trend. So for the trend, we want to compare the current value with the value in the previous year. So we go to the trend. Let me again copy the working version. And expand this a bit. Let me go to target, then back to trend. Okay. So what do I compute? I first compute the margin percentage, the current value, then the previous margin percentage, the margin percentage in the previous year. And once that is done, I compare the margin percentage in the current year against the margin percentage of the previous year. And if the percentage in the current year is greater than the previous one, I return 1, otherwise -1, otherwise 0. Again, this is just computing a number. I need to choose the graphical representation of this value, and I do that by choosing the trend graphic, for which I use a standard arrow. Here it is. I have defined the trend, Ctrl S to save, and if I go back here, you see the trend is not visible in the list under the margin. That is normal. Power BI did not refresh correctly, but it is enough to collapse the fields, expand the fields again, so that it refreshes all the values, and now under margin percentage, I have my trend. I can put it in my report, and now I have the margin, the percentage, and the trend, which is blank for the first year, and start showing values starting from the second year. Unfortunately, Power BI uses measured names to expose the status and the trend, and these names, margin percentage status and margin percentage trend, are chosen by the engine and you cannot modify them. Therefore, in order to avoid wasting all this space, you need to rename them in the report. So we go here and we rename margin percentage status to just status, and margin percentage trend, where is it? Rename to just trend. And here we go. Now we have created a report that is using KPI, which are stored in the model. As you have seen, KPI are easy to use, they are easy to implement, and they give you a tremendous power, because you have the option of turning any measure into a KPI, adding the goal, the status, and the trend. You will need to pay attention because the behavior in Excel and in Power BI is slightly different. But in order to analyze that would be much deeper, and so we leave the topic for another video. For now, play with KPI, start building yours, and enjoy DAX.